Two, one. Uh-oh. Looks like I got to talk again. So I got Monday, May 8th. It's about 7:30 in the morning. I did my walk, but also did my hunt for cigarettes, which is also healthy. So I still haven't given up that habit yet because it's kind of for me, it's a little bit of self-medication, unfortunately, involved. And the one thing that's true about cigarettes is that once you're hooked, you kind of get stupid when you're not smoking, or it's too long since a cigarette, and you kind of lose a little bit more brain power, and I can't afford that yet. I know a bunch of bullshit excuses. I'll get there. Don't worry. I got a plan. I didn't say it was a good plan, but it's a plan. But I wanted to talk about actually a contributing factor to a lot of people smoking, and something that's kind of unique to the last few generations, at least en masse, although there were always people who kind of suffered from this. Hold on, got to take my pills. Yummy. I'm drinking a straight decaf, and I'm probably going to take a little pill, go to sleep, because I only got like 5 hours of sleep. I know that's kind of a badge of honor for a lot of people, but it's actually kind of related to anxiety. Anxiety is kind of the big issue I wanted to talk about today. And why the hell do we need safe spaces? What the fuck, right? Why is it a thing? I remember in Queens College, we had my senior college. I went to a junior one before that, and I don't recall any safe spaces, although there was kind of a gay lesbian union. It was actually called Glue, I believe, or that might have been at Queens. I mixed these two things up. But there was a kind of need, at least at Queens College. I don't know about if anyone really cared at Queensboro. Talk about like a commuter college, no dorms or anything. It's a junior college. People really don't give a shit. Really wasn't much conflict there. People were just kind of zombies floating in and out. But over at Queens College, alma mater, there was a need to kind of keep people who were in the closet safe from being decloseted and or violently acted upon or assaulted. So there needed to be kind of a safe room, and the gay and lesbian club, the club room, ended up being kind of like that safe space for them. We kind of allowed smoking in it, where you couldn't really do that in any of the other club rooms. Well, you could, but, if you got caught, people would care. We actually had like administrators from the student union kind of coming in there because they knew they could smoke, and they were kind of, marked as like gay friendly. Some of the administrators were pretty cool. So, New York City does have its advantages. Anyway, so that was kind of the safe space and the meaning of safe space. But it's become something else, and I used to put it down, but now I kind of understand it. Especially if I kind of think about my past and what led to my anxiety disorder, at least partially, the kind of nurture of the nature-nurture mix, which is, more these psychological problems as opposed to the neurological, psychiatric. People grow up in our modern society. We're free to kind of not take part in community, in church, and that has kind of broken up the family as well. I know we talk about this president did this and that, and it broke up the black families, but nothing ever just affects one group. All right, we could kind of say that. Oh yeah, look at all the children born out of wedlock to black mothers, but there's also a spike in that in all the other groups. at least the white, Hispanic, and, traditional Catholics tend to be more into the whole staying married thing. So this is kind of something that kind of hit our culture and is even reversing some of the kind of, traditions of groups coming in. And for whatever reasons, you could have your conspiracy theories as far as like the CIA wanted to make sure that women would be paying more taxes and that they'd be kind of like a Democratic voter base, like this whole like Alinskyite kind of get into the government to change it from within and kind of utilize these kind of long-term kind of like devious goals, right? I don't know how much truth there is in that. There's a lot of things I would have to see to kind of not just the outcomes. Like I think it was Mark Twain that said, never grant conspiracy when incompetence will do just as well. And I kind of think like that a lot of the time, and that's why I disagree with some people's theories. It's just like, yeah, but what if they just suck? What if they're just kind of incompetent and they didn't really plan this? They just kind of, did whatever to garner votes, and it ended up with this. Kind of like the whole, the Clintons kind of pushing for the 3 strikes you're out thing, and kind of being tough on, the young black males that they wanted to bring to heel, and that resulting in all sorts of higher incarceration rates for blacks, or at least partially resulting in that, definitely contributing to it. Kind of school to prison pipeline we talk about. Now you know what that is. Like harsher penalties for crack as opposed to cocaine, all those theories. I don't go too much into that. I don't really even think that much of that because I'm more focused on psychosocial effects and how they affect individuals, how the culture affects the individual. There's like 50 names for that, by the way. Social psychology, psychological sociology. Who knows? Like there's like a new name made up every week, so they can get another department or whatever. People feel unsafe, right? Now, when I was growing up, there were these kind of say no to drugs, kind of Nancy Reagan thing. You do drugs, you're just going to explode. Your life is just going to fall to pieces. You drink the same thing. You smoke the same thing, right? So there's this kind of Puritan stream, at least during the 80s, that was kind of reacting to the exact opposite prior to that. Like, hey, we're getting out of hand here. It's time to kind of rein everything in. And, of course, we expanded the war on drugs and everything. And, Reagan went as far as to, trying to take on cartels in foreign countries and everything. So we had this, say no to drugs, all these bad things. It was very negative, It wasn't like, oh, if you have a clean life and you eat the right food, you're going to be healthy and happy, as much as, because there was some of that. I think there was this guy who dressed up in this skinless suit, which was kind of morbid and weird, like Slim something, or Captain Slim, I don't remember. But he would go around schools telling people about eat a healthy breakfast, brush your teeth, blah, 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 all these good things will happen. And that was kind of appropriate. In fact, that was kind of like a positive move in the kind of same direction. It's implying don't do drugs, but it's more like, eat fucking, whole wheat and shit. And that's good. I respect that. And I think that those kind of programs for schools are good, as long as, it's not run by the beef lobby and they're like, you must eat, 10 ounces of beef a day, like some kind of propagandist bullshit, as long as it's kind of based on kind of good science, healthy science. That's fine. We didn't really need to kind of bash people over the head with don't do drugs. And I think it had a negative effect. And like a lot of things, there's a bit of an interaction model. Especially when you're not the oldest. because what happens in families across the board, across all like socioeconomic status, when you have the oldest, whether it's a single parent or both parents, it's effectively kind of a single parent household anyway. We've kind of made all households the same in a lot of ways, because we have these kind of laissez-faire parents who are more concerned with making money than actually raising their children, right? And I don't put down making money. It's a lot easier to be happy if you have the money. So don't discount this kind of like, oh, I can't be spiritual if I have to make money, or I don't want to take part in capitalism or whatever. Like, what is capitalism to you? It's just like a moneyed system. It's not like necessarily all these kind of negatives we attribute to it, but you can treat it that way, and some people do. And you kind of have to watch out for those people and shit hammer them, and be a little less tolerant of assholes, greedy assholes. When somebody comes in and says, oh yeah, the average cost to do your kitchen is like $1 billion. It's like, the exaggerated claims of like, that starts to sound like, are you talking about the budget for NASA? What are you talking about? I wanted to like reface my cabinets in the kitchen, not gut it, not anything like that. Who the fuck do you go to? I remember I had this one time, where you had this kind of like greedy salesman from some cabinet place. It wasn't Sears in particular. It was like a, contractor, for Sears. That's sometimes what they do. So I'm not like calling out Sears for this, because it was some like rinky-dink company that they hired to do it. And they often don't know that they're such dickheads. But they try to take this really expensive version of cabinet refacing. That's like 3 times the price that you'd pay anybody else. And I'm sure they'd be like, well, make sure you write 2 checks, so they could tell Sears they only charge X when they charge much, much more, perhaps. I imagine that to be maybe the case. And this guy comes in and is like making these claims about how expensive a new kitchen is, like it's fucking, like it's annexing a nation and taking care of all its poor people. It was just like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then he turned around and he said, well, if you sign up now, we'll lower that price by $500. This ridiculously inflated price. We're going to lower it by $500. And I actually had a friend there, and me and him were very protective of my father, who was being sold this shit. And we just looked at him and said, go fuck yourself, leave. Because we were kind of trying to kick him out anyway. And that's what you got to do. You got to tell people to go fuck themselves. You got to tell people to, as long as you know that they're full of shit, you got to tell them to go fuck themselves. You got to tell them that you're trying to rip me off. I know it, and I'm going to complain about it. And I'm going to, call up Sears or whoever, Home Depot or whoever kind of sends out contractors to do this stuff, and complain about it. And often I've done that, and they're very kind of like, holy shit, really? Yeah, we're probably going to want to get rid of these people, Or they had that kind of, they sounded like that on the phone, like this was all real. They had taken the complaint seriously. And I've taken complaints when I worked at a supermarket. I know when someone is kind of feeling like, oh my God, this is really outside of what we wanted to do. We got to get rid of this company, as opposed to just, oh, look, I'm talking to a crazy person. Let me apologize for them feeling this way. Right? So we have a very sticky period in kind of the transition to a kind of more mature economy and society. And we kind of said, oh, we don't want to go to church Sunday, a lot of us. So we don't. So there goes our kids kind of connecting with other churchgoers and other like kids in that, and being socialized through that, because school isn't a very social atmosphere anymore. It's kind of where you go to kind of get picked on at this point, and there's no there isn't the kind of community, because people are so under socialized already. They can't really make communities like that. They kind of go online to do that at this point. And even if they do make friends that kind of interact online, there isn't kind of like an in vivo kind of playing stickball kind of interaction, because parents don't want their kids to go to the local park without like an adult and a kind of armed like Humvee to kind of protect them, because their head is full of they're going to get raped and being doing drugs within 10 minutes if you let them out of your sight. So they're kind of like captive in their homes, and all they could do to interact is kind of digital. When you do that, then you kind of put your kid on a train to go to high school. They're fucking scared to death, right? Like they were driven to school because you don't want to put them on the bus. You're afraid they're going to get bullied. They only had play dates, so there's like very limited kind of social atmosphere. And as I got older, we're able to use a computer. You were kind of fine with them just kind of having an online life. Maybe you'd be like, okay, you can only go on these kind of websites into these chat rooms, blah, 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 where it's all kids. And, it's very strictly controlled or whatever. I don't even know about that stuff. I don't have any kids. And that's another thing I didn't get into. Well, so you kind of have this kind of administrator, as parent. They're just kind of taking the money in and spending it on bills, but there's no kind of parent involved. Or I see that so much less. A lot of people are choosing not to have kids, and when they do, it seems like they think it's their God-given right not to parent them. And if your kid misbehaves, it's kind of like, who are you to say? There's much, more of an attitude of that, as opposed to, shut your fucking kid up, right? Not to be cruel, just like, and even in my days, it was kind of like acceptable if someone was like, hey, you're going to take care of this? Like, you give them the look. You wouldn't lecture them, but you give them the look like, hey, buddy, your kid's been freaking out. Maybe you should take them out of the store. Maybe they're allergic to light. Who fucking knows? But figure it out and get a babysitter and keep them at home until you can figure it out. Be a responsible parent. Maybe they're overwhelmed by like other people being around because they almost never are. It's like that supermarket becomes like the most social place in their life, right? Schools, you go to learn, right? So yeah, you can kind of meet people, but at the same time, you can kind of also sit there in the back and not really talk to anybody. And that back row of people that didn't want to talk to people is kind of like squeezed up to like, the second or third row. It gets to the point where teachers just kind of assign seats at this point in alphabetical order. We have a lack of family, like I just talked about, a lack of community, no church, no school, there's less playtime in school, less gym, less music, less, kind of socialization, at least possibilities. At least they'd come out with kind of their problems, and we could kind of go, oh, okay, he's running around with like a stick hitting people. Maybe he's a bit violent, so we can kind of, under the auspices of helping them, right? Not just kind of, we must scar their permanent record. Like there was always that threat of that. Again, very negative. Don't do drugs because your life will be ruined. Don't, do this or do that because it'll be on your permanent record and your life is over. Like everything led to your life being over. And we internalized that. And then it was AIDS. We went from the kind of almost Gnostic view of like you'll get STDs and whatever. But like we had, clinics you could go to. And people would talk about, yeah, I got the clap or whatever. And, they had to give me all these drugs and now I'm fine. Then it got stepped up with like, oh, no, you get this, you're going to die. All that kind of relaxation of, oh, well, we have treatments for these other things. It can be disgusting and ugly, and you got to be careful to wear condoms after that, but, you'll survive. Now it's like, oh, my God. Like, it's to the point where having, like, herpes 1 simplex, which like everyone has, which is like 80% of the populace, I believe. Where you get the cold sores. That's why they sell a Breva, because that's the herpes 1 simplex. That if you come up positive on that, you got herpes. You're going to spread, the death disease. People get it from like their older siblings, from like, choosing the wrong toothbrush one morning. And so you get cold sores. Big fucking deal. Like 90% of the time, it's not even communicable, right? And like I said, many of us have it from childhood. Wrong toilet seat, fucking, whatever. But we're like, just say no to sex is kind of like say no to drugs, right? Like everything's kind of, don't do this or, like all these negative things will happen. Your life will be taken away. Your life will be destroyed. And it's really hyperbolic. And that's what happens when people propagandize. They kind of, go into hyperbole. For me, that's kind of a good thing, because I could tell hyperbole and go, oh, okay, this is at least partly bullshit. It's definitely not like this. Your head's not going to explode, because you smoked a joint. But that kind of unconscious motivation is there, right? These kind of like things are seeped into your unconscious. Your conscious is kind of stupid, and it can't really think at the level of your conscious. So you're kind of ingesting these things. I know they say, oh, children are so malleable, but humans are. They're just more so. And things kind of get pushed in. So now you have this kind of negative, just say no to everything. Don't eat the wrong foods. Don't experiment with drugs. Don't have sex. Don't blah, blah, blah. Very unsafe environment. Right? Like you have the adults telling you everything is really dangerous. Well, what happens if you're already kind of unhealthy? Maybe you have like a genetic kind of anxiety thing going on. Runs in your family. Or maybe you just had a very traumatic childhood where an abusive parent or sibling, you were in a very unsafe environment at home, and now everyone's telling you, yeah, and the outside world is just as unsafe, if not worse. And you're thinking, holy shit, I'm scared constantly that like one of my parents is going to hit me with a wrench and kill me. And now you're saying that everything out there is just as bad? Wow. No wonder we need safe spaces, right? No wonder we have generations of people now, because it's systemic. Hopefully the more recent generations weren't so beaten with this stick of negativity that everything's going to go wrong, everything's going to explode. You put your dick in and then it just rot off, or your vagina will turn into like a pussy kind of like a pussy armpit with like fucking it'll rot. Your naughty bits will rot. Your tits will fall off. Like all these kind of messages kind of get put into our unconscious, and the unconscious, even though it's stupid, it's pretty powerful. And if you have these kind of signals always being sent at home that you're unsafe, and then you go to school, and wherever you're socialized, everything's unsafe. There's this kind of signal that, oh, you can only have play dates with this like one kid, because if you have multiple kids, it's unsafe. If you go to the park, with your bike, it's unsafe, just like automatically. There's drugs there and older kids and, prostitution, and, you'll be stolen and sold to, as a child prostitute. There's all this kind of hyperbole that actually does kind of make it into the unconscious and create a situation where you're kind of acting on these motivations, and you're scared to death. and not just if you have that home life. I remember seeing, I forget the name of the sitcom. It was with Kirk Cameron, Growing Pains maybe, and they got robbed. And it was this big thing because, the girl was all traumatized. The boys were kind of playing tough, but they were really, they were kind of traumatized too, because they thought their house was a safe environment. And then they get robbed. And it's like, oh, we're not safe. Someone could break in here and blah, blah, blah. But if you kind of have a family and a community, your brain goes to, oh, but my other family members, if they know something bad is happening to me, will do something. Even if it's just call the cops and kind of like, yell at somebody and then run away, at least it would kind of distract them, whatever. Your brain jumps there. Your unconscious brain goes, well, I have, my older brother is, a Sasquatch and he'll fuck him up. Or daddy has a gun and daddy's tough. Daddy is the protector. And if something does happen, as long as daddy's there, mommy can call the cops, or mommy, when you're a kid, you think mommy's going to take on the 6'5" house robber. You think that they're infinitely tough, right? So your brain gets this idea that there's a bit of safety. And if you have a community, you go, oh, my neighbor would help too. My neighbors, maybe, because you're part of a community. Maybe you see them in church. Maybe you see them at, community meetings of some sort. Maybe you have block parties, right? And you go, okay, the people in my community are, a little bit drunk right now, but they're, pretty much decent people, and I think they'd help me. You get these things kind of unconsciously. Well, what if you don't have that? What if you don't have contact with the community? What if you don't have faith in your family because you're scared of them? What if you go to school and you feel in danger there, which is a lot more common, right? Because kids are fucking nuts in that environment. You're left kind of needing shit, not just a safe space, but some fucking antidepressants and anti-anxietants, right? It becomes a very scary and almost, depending on what you have underlying and your genetic susceptibilities, it's a terrifying world that we've set up. And it's almost like, well, you got to make a bunch of money and get behind a wall and get like security. And then, maybe when you retire, you'll be able to be happy, right? There's no like living in the now. That's just way too dangerous. So there goes that other kind of like version of happiness, that other kind of stream of happiness that you can kind of touch. And that's taken away. Everything is about, preparing for some sort of future to be happy, right? To feel safe. And it's, you never get there. It's like utopia. Literally means no place. So what do you get? You get a bunch of miserable, scared people. And not just like the person who had the genetic susceptibilities, but like a lot of people. They never kind of grow out of the, childhood fear of the dark. It's almost like there are never any safety signals sent. So when these college kids are talking about, I want to feel safe, remember, they're still kids. And they're coming out of some really negative environments, not just in their houses, but in society. I don't recall us ever being this negative and ever being this kind of cowardly. But like societally taught to be cowards. And it takes a toll on someone's psyche. Especially if there is that home life where the parents don't give a shit because they work 70 hours a week. And they just see you as kind of like whining, being a problem. Like, shit, I got to like go to work. And this kid is like scared, when he wakes up, like every morning. I want to get rid of this fucking kid. Can I give him back? He's too much of a problem. And we're starting to see our kids like that. Hey, my kid's a problem. Can you drug him? Is there something you can do? I can't do anything like parenting, so I can't. I don't even know what he might need because I didn't get that in my generation either. So why don't you, take him and I don't know, put him in a fucking home or something? You put him in like a mental hospital. Who gives a shit? I just don't want the problem. I got to go to work all the time because I make like $8.50 an hour at like 3 jobs. We have a populace that is either by design or by just incompetence and free coincidence totally perfect for destabilization through we need more security. Oh my God, it's like fish in a barrel. Everyone's terrified. I remember reading Jimmy Breslin, who was like a big New York kind of guy, kind of editorialist. I don't remember if it was, I think it was Newsday, although I think maybe he was so big he kind of was in several, but he said, yeah, we don't leave the house because we figured we're not bulletproof. We're scared. Like we had a dip in crime in New York because people literally were staying at home. They wouldn't go out because it was just too dangerous. So it was almost like the peak of crime had resulted in a lower crime rate because everyone was just like, I'm not going to fucking do it. There's just too many places I can't go now. And we're still stuck in that. But now it's, someone's going to like, bomb a movie theater or, hop into the club with a rifle and start shooting. We are sitting ducks for this kind of manipulation because we're already there. We've already been put into just being scared to death. And now our government is reflecting who we are. They say that it's a government of, by, and for the people, and in some ways it still is. Not in any way that I think any of us like, but it's reflecting our fears, and we're allowing them to have these Patriot Acts and to renew the Patriot Act, to amend it and make it even worse and take away freedoms because we need a safe space. We need to have some sort of signal that things aren't just fucking dangerous. That I can go to a football game and not worry about like pipe bombs going off. I remember shortly after 9/11 kind of driving over a bridge. And I was scared to death. I had just started driving and I had an anxiety complex, but I would also kind of just be scared of, like the thought that came in my head was, what if someone blows up this bridge? And there were news reports. Hey, what if someone blows up this bridge? Can it happen? Unfortunately, yes. You have guys on TV who would kind of like pop out an AR-15 and be like, I got this past your security. I got this right past, airport security. Oh, we need more security. No, we need competent security, right? Instead, we kind of have a security show. Hey, at least, people make money, makes jobs. But I have to take a pill to get on an airplane because all this stuff is kind of sunk into my already fucked up brain. And that's happened to a lot of us, whether it's nature, nurture, both, or just such pressure from society that we're kind of always feeling like our house was just robbed. And no good can come of that. We need to kind of look at, because we always, somebody goes off the wall and is running around with a stick hitting children, some crazy adult who may be schizophrenic or whatever. We look at kind of like, oh, okay, we got to help them. But we also have to kind of figure out, well, how are we affecting our society? By not raising our kids, by not socializing our kids, by not taking part in community, by losing kind of religion as a community kind of creator and not replacing it. It doesn't have to be religion. It could just be like, hey, we're all from this town. Let's have a block party. Anything like that. Just to kind of create, oh, I know my neighbors now. You know how many people in New York City, if there was a block party on their block, would be like, who the fuck is this person? I didn't know I lived near these people. All right? Not in a negative way, just like, I've never seen you before. I had that in Fresh Meadows, which was kind of an idyllic community. We didn't know who our neighbors were if they were more than 2 houses away. And we'd kind of see their car pass by and not make the connection that they lived literally like 3 houses away. And this is like a nice neighborhood. But of course it was in New York City, so everyone had the New York City kind of mindset. Every neighbor's kid is a danger. It's not an attitude you should have if you want your children to actually have friends. You can only have play date with the kid that, is a pianist and doesn't talk. There has to be like these perfectly safe playmates for your kid. That kid's probably going to end up being a mass murderer. That's less safe. He's so unsocialized himself, right? And it's fucking people up. Now, I'm very proud of what my sister's done. She has a bunch of boys, and she's a great, boy mom. But she wants to kind of, take them places, get them out of the house. She works 7 days a week, but she okay, the beginning of the day on the weekends is for, us to go and do things together, right? The father works a lot too, but he's, I guess he does the 7-day-a-week thing. And they shouldn't have to be these super people to be parents. I'm proud of them for being kind of these awesome, kind of super parents. But that's shit. That's a fucking lot of pressure. That's a lot of, not lack of sleep. There's a lot of, it's just a lot. It shouldn't be that hard. Society could kind of help us take care of our kids by having 40-hour work weeks. By not letting the prices of things be so manipulated and exploded like real estate. We have kind of a responsibility to each other, and we part of the problem is that we're more concerned with ripping each other off. Remember, money isn't the enemy, it's the love of money. Even when you talk about kind of being left-wing and liberal. Liberals want money too. They're going to take, a book deal. They're going to, not go, oh, I'm rich, let me give all of it away. I don't want to be rich. No, who the fuck does that? If you make your money fair and square and morally, all power to you. But we've allowed this kind of incipient corruption. It's almost, the entire party system is just kind of full of corrupt people. And we complain about their immorality, while half of us are kind of like, what do you do? Oh, I sell hospitals. Yeah, we close down a hospital. I make sure we get the most money for it. So I destroy communities. Holy shit, you're a fucking evil fuck. Oh, but he makes a lot of money. Well, then marry the evil fuck. No, hang the evil fuck. We are way too lenient and way too, what's that word that's always used in kind of the left hand of stupidity, more so than the right hand of stupidity. Tolerance. We are way too tolerant of evil fucks, and we've allowed the institutionalization. This is assuming you're a good person and you're not one of the evil fucks, but we're way too tolerant of them. Like with my story with the guy coming in trying to reface my cabinets for a small fortune. we're way too tolerant. It's not cool to rip people off because, hey, maybe I'll be able to. No, you shouldn't think that way. And if you maybe went to a church, you would have learned that. Even if it's a community center, you would have learned that when you tried to, oh, I got this comic book, I'll sell it to you for $5. You bought it for like $1.25, and there's like 100 of them at the comic shop a block away. Instead, you should say, hey, dude, it's at the comic shop. Be a decent person, right? And eventually, when people know you're a scumbag, they're going to shit hammer you. But if you're not socialized, you don't know that. And you can kind of spend your life kind of being away from people, being behind walls, being in the ritzy restaurants, and not really having to deal with normal people, because the only normal people you see are the defeated ones who are like serving you your dinner. And so what does this have to do with anything? We've made a crappy world for the next generation. And we've helped make it that way because we didn't say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be a bunch of fucking cowards. When we saw the commercials after 9/11 of flags and like, oh yeah, you thought you were going to, fuck up our culture. Instead, you made us put up a bunch of flags. What the fuck does that mean? We did all the things they expected us to do. We tightened security. We made it a complete pain in the ass to take a plane, even though most of the security that isn't even fucking real. I will tell you where there is real security. If you're on the tarmac and you're making a delivery, my brother was doing that to some New York City airport. I forget which one of the two major ones. And they don't know if you're supposed to be there. They will send a fucking SWAT team. Right? You're in real danger of being killed. All because he was delivering something to buildings and grounds so that they can put up more flowers. There was a real fucking SWAT team and it was there in minutes because they thought, oh my God, this might be a truck with a bomb, right? So there is some real security there. But it shouldn't really have to affect you that much, right? But it does. We shouldn't be like Israel and give up all our rights. Yeah, they're used to it, and they're like, oh, don't be, a bunch of whiners. It's no big deal. It kind of is. I was working at an airport. I was doing inventories at the time for an inventory company, and we had to be escorted to the bathroom. So what? We didn't go to the bathroom, the hidden kind of Michael Corleone gun, somehow in the toilet. Put it together so we can go and kind of snipe a couple people at 2 a.m. when there was nobody in the airport. Meanwhile, the guy who did shoot people in the airport legally put it through the airport and was given his gun even though he was mentally ill. We're kind of being really penny wise and pound foolish, even with security. We're allowing mass surveillance to the point where now our country makes deals with other countries to mass surveil their citizens while they mass surveil ours. That's a bit of a kind of theory, an internet theory, but I have no, it doesn't seem like it's that outside of what we're doing, right? It actually kind of makes sense. Oh, we can't surveil our citizens except through metadata, so we'll have, another country, one of our Western allies, I won't mention who, surveil the entirety of our country in detail, and then they'll quid pro quo, and we'll do that to their citizens. Again, I won't mention the name of whatever country across the pond, wink wink. Like I said, internet theory. But you don't really doubt it, do you? And it seems to make sense. So we're wondering why people need drugs, in the past, these drugs didn't even exist. So how did they get by? Was there this huge suicide rate? Or do we kind of have communities? Do we have these things that humans need to be, feel safe? And now that we don't have that, I guess there's going to be some sort of evolution where people who don't feel safe are going to, end up taking drugs that kind of sterilize them, I guess. And they won't have kids, and pretty soon we won't have a wimpy kind of wussy generation, because they won't breed. They'll be too scared to. They'll be too scared to even talk to the opposite sex or whatever they want. Maybe some of these one of these, 17 pronouns might be responsible. Might come from people just being scared of intimacy. Like they don't want to be anywhere near it. So maybe they claim to be asexual. And they're like masturbating the fuck out of themselves at night to the opposite sex or maybe even the same sex. But they don't want to admit that they have a sexuality. Because it's too scary to let somebody in your house who might stab you, right? You never know. They could be an axe murderer. But now we're kind of assuming that that's like a real threat. And I'm starting to get scared that it might kind of start making the predictions kind of come true. That we all end up becoming so fucked up that we all become kind of crazy. And it's becomes more and more dangerous, like this kind of downward spiral, right? Because we're, medicated, because we're socialized into fear. That kind of American utilitarian toughness, alive and well in all sorts of places, but definitely not the kind of big liberal cities. In fact, the highest number as a percentage of single people, which a tidbit I kind of passed by, so sorry I don't have it in the comments. The highest percentage of single people is New York City. And that's like a really slutty city. It's full of just whores, and man whores and women whores, You talk to them, they'll fuck you. But people are like, running away. Right? They won't go to 6th Ave and kind of like taste of the NYU girls or boys. It's kind of pitiful. And much with myself. I feel like I'm a product of kind of this New York City kind of fear. The like fear-mongered United States. And that hits the cities, I think, the hardest because it's already kind of a scary, overwhelming kind of thing for a lot of people. And you just kind of push them over an edge they're already close to, just from living in these kind of crowded areas. And you get everyone needing, psych meds. And you get people who are single till very late in life. And often they don't even have like a partner. They have more of someone they kind of visit for sex. And have like the booty call, which is not fun middle-aged. You go from play dates to sex dates. You're like, safe sexual partner that you can visit every once in a while. But you're not really sure if you want them to be in the house, for any kind of long term. So we're breaking down the family, and we say that was done to like African Americans through all sorts of things that happened, during the Clintons and before and after. But it's really all of the families are breaking down. Parents are kind of harshly neglectful at this point. And I don't think I'm just talking about like my upbringing as a Gen Xer. I think we were maybe the first kind of latchkey kid generation, but there's also, it's been more codified. It was kind of said in our generation that there are now latchkey kids. Not everyone's a latchkey kid. Now it's kind of like, you might see them on the trip, to and from school. Maybe more people are being driven to school or whatever. at least when they're younger, because we're so scared of them being, abducted. But if that's your interaction with your family, okay, I got 20 minutes to go bring the kid to school, and then I got to run to work, and then I got to do this and that, and da, da, da. And then, maybe I'll get home 7 or 8, throw something in my face and go to sleep. And if they're young, they might be asleep by 8 or 9, and you're kind of you never see them. You just kind of if you don't stop doing this, I'll take away your iPad. And that's kind of the only parent you can be. We're forcing more and more couples into being like that. Much less to kind of single parents, where there was always kind of an issue with that. Because I was from a single parent household, which kind of made me automatically a latchkey kid. There would never be a parent when I got home. In fact, there wouldn't even be my siblings until much later. This is not a healthy environment, right? It's not healthy that they need safe spaces, that they need these kind of signals that they won't be harmed, because they're so paranoid now. This is societally induced paranoia. And unfortunately, like I said, when you have these kind of negative signals, just kind of smacking you in the head constantly, and it's your interactions with people are often very negative, and you have very little interactions with the adults in your community because you're going to get raped if your parents don't want you to get raped or molested. I know a Catholic priest who's pretty much asexual, I'm pretty sure. That he just doesn't really have that. He actually kind of hangs out with he's an older guy. He holds out, kind of hangs out with the older women, and you could see it kind of makes him feel good. That's his kind of intimacy. Some of them he's very kind of intimate with. So there's kind of this non-sexual relationships he has, and he's fine with that, it seems. He also teaches, not teaches, but he has a parish in a college. He's one of those college, like Newman Club people. Never even a suspicion of him kind of, touching somebody, He does make raunchy jokes. That's about it, though. But everyone loves it for that, because he's funny. A lot of asexual people are kind of raunchy, by the way. But he says that, let's say he goes to somebody's house for counseling, spiritual counseling, which is really just kind of more of a psychology thing nowadays, with kind of little tidbits of religion, which was because he kind of provided that service to some people I knew at the campus. Great guy, awesome person, well hailed and loved, but despite his reputation, despite people kind of getting that he's not really a sexual person, he says he has problems, especially if he's trying to help out a young boy. They won't leave him in the room with him to do a little therapy and maybe help him deal with some of these fears. I'm sure he's getting a big call for that because so many kids are scared to death. Now we have to kind of determine what's the normal fear, that you have from having kind of a negative and unsupportive environment. And I remember in child psychology, it was pretty grim when we talk about people who, were locked in a box. And, these kids didn't have Nintendos in their closet that maybe their crazy parents put them in. But it kind of feels like the same thing. And there was some pretty bad outcomes from that, with violence, mental illness, anxiety problems, very severe kind of PTSD. What are we doing to our kids? Even if, let's say, you want to work 70 hours a week, you figure there's no other way you can kind of have the lifestyle you want for you and your kids without it. What about all these unemployed people that really need to just kind of, do something? And maybe that's what they want to do, male or female, like, take care of kids and family. Maybe have their own kind of community with those kids. But we assume they're, child molesters, right? That even like your babysitter, if you hire like a stranger, because you don't have any community, you kind of have to do a resume thing when you could have gotten the 16-year-old girl down the block that everyone knew, but you don't know her because you don't even know she lives there, because she's locked in a box, right? The lockbox society, Al Gore would be proud. Now you have to hire some middle-aged person who you don't have any vetting process for. And sometimes they're awesome nannies, and sometimes they're abusive. And you're kind of tossing the dice because they're not in the neighborhood. You don't know what the hell's going on with them. That was like the bread and butter of young women kind of making a little bit of money. Even some young men, Actually, I kind of I'd love to have, like, if I had a family, I'd love to have kind of a handyman kind of guy taking care of my kids. Because, I got arthritis. So unless that gets fixed, I'm not going to be able to do those, keep my house the way I want to. And he might be awesome. Make him fucking, all sorts of healthy food or something. And if he was in my community and I knew that, I could kind of hire him, right? But I don't have that community connection. Very flippant. It's very kind of acquaintance-like. And we need to get away from that. We need to have communities because it is necessary. We need to have family structures because it is necessary. We need to have socialization of our children in environments that aren't play dates. Aren't just like, this weird birthday party kind of thing. Where you have all these chaperones kind of making sure the kids don't talk or interact too much. Because, we don't want the kid to kind of mention something and whatever. Like, there's just this paranoia that everything outside of you is dangerous. And as we kind of codify that, we're creating parents who are spreading that, spreading those belief systems into the unconscious of our children. And I say our children because guess what? We got to fucking deal with them when they're crazy. Right? We got to deal with them when they're like, they want to go around killing animals or something. Right? It becomes society's problem. When you have kind of like, when your kids aren't parented, and they could also become the opposite of, like, these cowering kids in the corner. They could become the wolves. Remember, man is a wolf to man. There will always be kind of people who will take advantage. But you have to have these kind of scared shitless kids in the corner quivering for those wolves to be able to kind of feed. So you need kids to kind of stand up for themselves and every once in a while punch a bully. It's fucking necessary. And we've dropped the ball. We've ignored our responsibility. And us people who are on the outside observing, who don't have kids, we can't really raise our kids that way, and the society wouldn't really let us. I'm sorry, if someone was bullying my kid, and my kid fucking punches him, or a couple of kids get together and beat that bully's ass, fucking good for them. We should be like, okay, well, the bully got punished, and those kids got, the self-esteem boost they deserve. We shouldn't be punishing them either. Right? It would just be kind of a determination, and we have to kind of be not just an administrator when you're a teacher. You really do have to kind of know what's going on socially, right? Because we don't have that anywhere else. So maybe the kids are like a little gang. I mean, I could kind of see that, like, they're bullying the bully because it's kind of fun, and they really, the bully didn't do shit to them. You never know. But you never know if you don't pay attention. That was a kind of a weird aside, but, just kind of opening the possibilities a little bit. Things we have to look out for. But you'll know. Like, if the community knows that a kid is a fucking knucklehead that likes to, pick on people, If you and your family, they say, we think your kid might be a bully. How does he act at home? And they're like, yeah, he's a fucking bully. You're always having to kick his ass to keep him from, stabbing his younger brother or sister. People know. And that's part of kind of growing up. The community kind of figures out what you are and how you're currently interacting, and they try to change it. They try to change it for the better, for the positive. If you're scared shitless, they try to boost your esteem. It's kind of like this natural reaction that communities and families have when they're allowed to be that. And when they're not kind of squashed by this current paranoia. Fucking play date? That's called going over to a kid's house. That usually happen like, text me and tell me that you're going to Bob's house, right? That's about it. I don't know this kid. No, you can't. Oh, okay. You kind of look at, try to meet their parents and shit. And if they're like on the wrong side of the tracks, maybe you'd be like, maybe not. But if they're either good people on the wrong side of the tracks or they're, just good people in general, you're kind of like, yeah, you can go there. Just kind of be careful in the neighborhood, Make sure, Billy's parents drive you home as opposed to walking through like, the industrial, meatpacking district, with like, transvestite hookers and fucking muggers and shit. We don't need to protect our children as much from society as we need to protect them from this paranoia, because they're missing necessary growth. And now they need safe spaces. And that's the least of it. So when you hear the kind of complaint about SJWs needing safe spaces, try to take a bigger observation. Snowflakes? Yeah. But why? Is it enough to just say, well, they're fucking snowflakes? Well, why, all these other generations of children grew up tough, especially in like big cities. Why the hell are they now snowflakes? It's not enough to complain. Every generation complains about its children, right? Because we're kind of scared to death of, the wolves within those packs. And the more we let the wolves kind of run wild, the less safe it is for the non-wolves. People just trying to, get along while they're scared to death. In terms of kind of, at least with people who have underlying disorders, it's so fucking terrifying. Imagine it, to be just kind of scared all the time in the house. Unless you're alone, then you kind of feel better. Right? Oh, God, they're not here. Good. Any minute they can come in now, right? It's kind of like you're, constantly masturbating and you have to worry that, like, someone's going to catch you, but with a bit more fear of, like, wolf-like behavior. We need to do what's necessary, and we need to create a system that allows it. And that's really what we should be looking at. Not how can we kind of stick everybody in a lead cubicle, especially before 18, so that they're safe. Why do we have an environment that they have to be so protected from? What have we done wrong? And my last point with this, as I get, over an hour again, my last point with this is we can't be politically correct all the time. It's just like in Europe being invaded by, not Muslims. Like there's actually not many women and children involved. It tends to be, these kind of like war-aged males. At least some of the places are getting a lot of that. Are we letting in dangerous people? Are we allowing people to get over the border from Mexico? Actually, are we allowing people to get over the border from southern Mexico that are kind of coming in and actually making Mexico more dangerous? and they want to kind of, I think they've had kind of, let's build a southern wall. Maybe we should be building a wall down there. Who knows? Maybe Mexico and the immigrants from Mexico aren't the problem. I mean, criminals from, any kind of illegal immigrant that's a criminal, to me is a problem. But we need to kind of think of these things more like people who are just trying to create a safe environment overall, as opposed to, well, once everything goes to shit for everybody in their kind of personal environments, then we'll kind of try to, put everyone behind a wall that way. You get rich enough, you can get behind a walled kind of development with security if you have the wealth. And if you don't, you fucked. Is that what we want? I'd rather have a big wall at the southern border, or like I said, maybe the Mexican southern border, than have basically all the haves behind a wall and behind police, and all the have-nots, which you have to admit, that's a possibility in the United States of, pretty much everybody becoming a have-not overnight. And now you're in like Lord of the Flies. We don't want that society. We never did, and we never will. Nobody wants that society. And we need to look at how it gets that way and how we can stop it. Because community, family, and larger society, connecting to that is necessary in order to get from being, a kid to an adult. And we can't depend on just them having enough money to kind of be protected from that. What if you don't have the money for private school? You can give them a bouncer, to kind of follow them around. I don't think you'd have the money for that if you don't have the money for private school, right? It's getting ridiculous. It's like we're all going to have to register with the Treasury Department and get somebody from the Secret Service to protect us from our fellow citizens. And we're missing out. The knowledge we're missing out on from people who... I remember one of my neighbors taught me how to do drywall with 12-inch blades. I am still fucking amazing at it. I can literally create an entire wall on those kind of slats, like the old school. Oh man, I'm good. And my neighbor taught me that. My father wasn't handy. He had rheumatoid arthritis. And before I got my arthritis, I was awesomely handy because I had a neighbor who was really handy. That, and I watched a lot of Bob Vila. So look at the development of people, finding out what they like. Just finding out that the world isn't full of people who are going to try to molest you and or kill you is a big thing, and it's necessary. So that's me signing off. I think that's a good point to end with. And shout out to my neighbor Jim for teaching me that drywall. Till this day, I'm awesome at it, even though my hands don't work that well. And I really appreciate it. Thanks for being a good neighbor. And I hope that the rest of you can find some good neighbors and kind of, share some skills and, be more friendly than the typical American in like New York. And I hope you kind of, I wish you good luck with your kids in this current environment. And I hope that I can help. I guess from not having kids, I kind of see them all as my kids. And I hope I can kind of help at least society kind of look at things in a way that will help them. So that's it for me. Have a good one. Good luck.